Every few years, a product comes along that makes everything else look dated overnight. The last time that happened in tablets was 2010, when Steve Jobs walked on stage with the first iPad. Since then, the formula has been simple: faster chip, sharper screen, thinner frame, repeat. Nobody has broken that cycle. Until now. Huawei just unveiled the MatePad T-Glass, and if the reported specs hold up, the tablet market will never look the same again. Transparent screens are not a new idea. Samsung, LG, and dozens of startups have teased transparent display concepts at tech fairs for years. The problem was always identical. Under controlled lab lighting, these screens looked incredible. Step into real sunlight and the image disappeared completely. Contrast collapsed, brightness could not compete, and the battery drained in roughly 90 minutes under load. Every prototype stayed in the lab. Huawei claims to have solved all three problems at once, and that changes everything. The technology inside the T-Glass works through a combination of a transparent LED panel, microlayers of quantum dots, and an adaptive backlighting system that only activates in the exact areas where content appears. The rest of the screen stays fully see-through. What you get is the physical world behind the device remaining completely visible, while apps, documents, and video appear to float directly on the glass in front of it. Huawei engineers describe it as a window between the physical world and digital information, not a headset, not glasses, just the device itself acting as the layer between both realities. The display is also coated with Huawei's paper-matte nano-textured glass, which etches the surface at a microscopic level to scatter incoming light and eliminate glare entirely. Unlike cheap matte screen protectors that dull colors, the paper matte layer keeps image quality sharp and vibrant while making the screen readable in direct sunlight. The refresh rate sits at 128 Hz, resolution at 2.8K, and the screen measures 12.4 inches. On paper, no tablet from Apple, Samsung, or anyone else ships with a display architecture even close to this. The processor is the Kirin 9000S, paired with between 12 and 16 GB of RAM and storage, starting at 512 GB. The battery capacity ranges from 8,000 to 10,000 mAh, and charging runs at 100 W, taking the device from empty to 85% in under 40 minutes. For comparison, Apple's iPad Pro tops out at roughly 45 W charging. The M Pencil 3 stylus is included in the box with over 10,000 pressure levels, and so is the magnetic keyboard. Apple charges approximately $350 extra for the equivalent accessories on the iPad Pro. The estimated price for the T-Glass sits between 8,999 yen and 12,999 yen, which converts to roughly $1,250 to $1,800. Now here is where the story gets bigger than the device. The company that built this was supposed to be finished. In 2018, then-President Donald Trump signed the National Defense Authorization Act, blocking all U.S. government agencies from using Huawei equipment. In 2019, Huawei was added to the Entity List, a designation meaning no American company could do business with them without government approval. Google cut ties immediately, pulling Android services, the Play Store, Gmail, YouTube, and Map. ARM, the British chip design firm, stopped licensing its architecture to Huawei. TSMC, the world's largest chip manufacturer based in Taiwan, stopped fabricating their processors entirely. The strategy was clear: cut Huawei off from every critical technology layer simultaneously. It did not work. Huawei's chip division HiSilicon continued developing the Kirin processor line using architectural designs it had licensed before the ban. China's state-backed semiconductor manufacturer SMIC stepped in as the fabrication partner. According to analysis by Tech Insights, a Canadian semiconductor research firm that examined the chips under an electron microscope, SMIC is producing these processors at approximately 7 nanometers. Using older deep ultraviolet lithography machines from Dutch manufacturer ESML combined with a multi-patterning technique that exposes the silicon in multiple passes to achieve smaller features than the machines were originally designed for. It is expensive, the yield rate is lower than ideal, and it is not competitive with TSMC's 3nm process. But it works. The Mate 70 shipped on these chips. The Mate 80 series followed with a reported 35% to 42% performance improvement over the previous generation. And the T-Glass runs the Kirin 9000S, designed and manufactured entirely within China, without a single piece of American equipment in the supply chain. On the software side, HarmonyOS now supports over 15,000 applications and contains no Google or Android code. It runs on phones, tablets, and laptops across Huawei's entire product line. This is a full operating system built from scratch under sanctions, and it is now in its 6th major version. The honest picture, though, is this. Outside China, the T-Glass has a wall in front of it. No Google Play Store, no Gmail, no YouTube, no map. Workarounds exist, but they are unreliable, and many banking and streaming apps simply do not function. The launch timeline puts a China release in Q3 2025 and limited international availability in Q4, with no confirmed rollout to the United States or Europe due to ongoing trade restrictions. The plastic frame lacks the premium build of Apple's aluminum iPad Pro, there is no official IP dust and water resistance rating, and software support is promised for only 3 years compared to Apple's 5 or more. So did Huawei kill the iPad? For the average consumer outside China who needs Google services and a deep app library, the iPad is still the practical choice. But for the first time in 15 years, a company released a tablet that makes the iPad look like the one playing catch-up. Transparent display technology, 100W charging, a bundled M pencil and keyboard, and a manufacturing story that no analyst predicted was still possible. That combination does not come from a company that is losing. The question worth asking now is not whether Huawei can compete with Apple. The question is whether Apple is moving fast enough to compete with Huawei. The smartphone war just got brutal. Xiaomi's 15 Ultra launched at MWC 2025 in Barcelona with specs that make even Apple nervous. We're talking a 5,410 mAh silicon-carbon battery in the global model and a massive 6,000 mAh in the China version, while iPhone 16 Pro Max sits at just 4,685 mAh. That's a 15% smaller battery right off the bat. But here's where it gets interesting. Xiaomi charges at 90W wired and 80W wireless, filling up in under an hour. Apple maxes out at 25W MagSafe wireless and roughly 27W wired. You're looking at more than triple the charging speed on Xiaomi's side. The camera battle is where things explode. Xiaomi 15 Ultra packs a quad camera system with a massive 1-inch Sony LYT900 sensor on the main 50MP shooter. That's the same sensor size you'd find in premium compact cameras. Then there's the 200MP periscope telephoto lens with 4.3x optical zoom that crops into the sensor for lossless zoom up to 120x digital. Add a 50MP ultra-wide and another 50MP floating telephoto with 3x zoom, and you've got a photography beast. iPhone 16 Pro Max counters with a triple camera setup, 48MP main, 48MP ultra-wide, and a 12MP periscope telephoto with 5x optical zoom. On paper, Xiaomi dominates with that 200MP sensor, but Apple's computational photography and sensor shift stabilization keep it competitive in real-world shot. PhoneArena's camera test scored Xiaomi 15 Ultra at 158 points versus iPhone 16 Pro Max's 154 points. DxOMark rated Xiaomi at 159 for camera performance, placing it 11th globally. The 1-inch sensor pulls in dramatically more light, especially in low-light scenarios, and that 200MP periscope delivers zoom detail that the iPhone's 12MP telephoto simply cannot match. But Apple fights back with consistency. Video recording on iPhone supports 4K at 120 frames per second, ProRes, and spatial video for Vision Pro. Xiaomi shoots 8K at 30 frames per second and 4K at 120 frames per second, offering more resolution but less ecosystem integration. Now let's talk processors. Xiaomi 15 Ultra runs on Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Elite, built on a 3nm process with an Oryon CPU delivering a 33% performance boost in graphics and 42% better efficiency compared to Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. iPhone 16 Pro Max uses Apple's A18 Pro, also 3nm, with a 6-core CPU, 6-core GPU, and a 16-core neural engine running at 35 trillion operations per second. Benchmark tests show Snapdragon 8 Elite even beating A18 Pro in some raw power tests, but Apple's chip shines in sustained performance and thermal management. Xiaomi pairs this with up to 16GB LPDDR5X RAM and 1TB UFS 4.1 storage. Apple offers 8GB RAM with up to 1TB NVMe storage, which is faster than UFS but comes with less multitasking headroom. Display size matters. Xiaomi 15 Ultra features a 6.73-inch LTPO AMOLED screen with 3200 nits peak brightness and a 1 to 120 Hz adaptive refresh rate. That's the brightest smartphone display on the market right now. iPhone 16 Pro Max counters with a larger 6.9-inch Super Retina XDR OLED, 2000 nits peak brightness, and 1 to 120 Hz promotion. Xiaomi wins on brightness for outdoor visibility, but Apple takes the edge in screen size and color accuracy with HDR10 and Dolby Vision support. Price tells the real story. Xiaomi 15 Ultra starts at approximately $1,555 globally, with the 512GB model hitting around $1,128. iPhone 16 Pro Max starts at $1,199 for 256GB and climbs to $1,599 for 1TB. So depending on configuration, they're neck and neck on price, but Xiaomi delivers more hardware for the money with that bigger battery, faster charging, and superior camera zoom. Build quality separates them too. iPhone 16 Pro Max uses a Grade 5 titanium frame with ceramic shield glass, weighing 227g and measuring 8.25 mm thick. Xiaomi 15 Ultra opts for aerospace-grade aluminum and glass with an optional eco-leather back, weighing 226g in black and white variants, 229g in silver chrome, and measuring 9.35 mm to 9.48 mm thick. Both carry IP68 water resistance rated for 1.5 meters up to 30 minutes. Software makes or breaks the experience. iPhone 16 Pro Max runs iOS 18 with guaranteed updates for at least 5 years. Xiaomi 15 Ultra ships with HyperOS 3 based on Android 15, promising 4 major Android upgrades but historically weaker long-term support compared to Apple. Ecosystem integration heavily favors iPhone if you're already using MacBooks, iPads, Apple Watch, or AirPods. Xiaomi plays better with Google services and offers more customization freedom. The verdict comes down to priorities. If you want extreme zoom capability, massive battery life, blazing fast charging, and the brightest display ever put on a smartphone, Xiaomi 15 Ultra delivers raw hardware superiority. You're getting a camera system that rivals dedicated photography gear with that 1-inch sensor and 200MP periscope. Huawei just dropped a phone with an 8000 nit display. That's the brightest smartphone screen ever created, and it's nearly 3 times brighter than most flagship phones you can buy right now in 2025. The United States spent years trying to kill Huawei's ability to make phones like this through the most aggressive tech sanctions in history. It didn't work. The Mate 80 series just launched with 4 different models, and we need to talk about how this happened and what it means for everyone watching. Let's start with the lineup because Huawei isn't playing around. The base Mate 80 starts at 4,799 yen, which converts to roughly $660. That's your entry flagship with a 6.75-inch display and the Kirin 9020 chipset. Move up to the Mate 80 Pro and you're looking at 5,999 yen to 7,999 yen, about $825 to $1,100, with the same 6.75-inch screen but a better Kirin 9030 processor in the 12GB RAM models. The Mate 80 Pro Max is the super flagship at 7,999 yen to 8,999 yen, roughly $1,100 to $1,240, and this one jumps to a 6.9-inch OLED display with 16GB of RAM and the Kirin 9030 Pro chipset. Then there's the Mate 80 RS Ultimate Design, the luxury version that costs 11,999 yen to 12,999 yen, about $1,650 to $1,790, and it's the first Mate or P series phone ever to pack 20GB of RAM. That's the highest memory configuration Huawei has ever offered in a flagship phone. Now about that 8,000 nit brightness. Most flagship phones right now hit somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000 nits at peak brightness. The Mate 80 series nearly triples that. You can use this phone in direct desert sunlight, on a bright beach in the middle of summer, anywhere with harsh lighting, and the screen stays perfectly readable. Huawei paired this with a 1 to 120 Hz LTPO adaptive refresh rate, high-frequency PWM dimming to reduce eye strain, and an enhanced touch sampling rate that makes every interaction feel instant. This display technology alone puts the Mate 80 at the absolute top of the smartphone industry. But here's where it gets interesting. Huawei won't share detailed chip specifications, probably because of sanctions, but they did share performance numbers. The base Mate 80 delivers a 35% performance improvement over the Mate 70, which ran on the Kirin 9110. The Mate 80 Pro with 12GB of RAM shows a 35% performance jump over the Mate 70 Pro that used the Kirin 9020. The Mate 80 Pro with 16GB and the Mate 80 Pro Max both hit a 42% performance increase compared to the Mate 70 Pro Plus with its Kirin 9200 chip. These aren't small gains. This is a massive generational leap, and Huawei achieved it while cut off from advanced Western manufacturing equipment. The camera systems show the same level of ambition. The standard Mate 80 features a 50-megapixel main camera with a second-generation red maple primary color sensor, a 40-megapixel ultra-wide camera with an f/2.2 aperture, and a 12-megapixel periscope telephoto with an f/3.4 aperture. There's also a 1.5 multispectral channel system that enhances color accuracy and dynamic range. The Mate 80 Pro upgrades to a 50-megapixel main camera with a 1/1.28-inch sensor, keeps the 40-megapixel ultra-wide, but introduces a dual periscope telephoto system with 4x and 8x optical zoom. This dual periscope setup is genuinely innovative because it eliminates the need for digital zoom at multiple focal length. You get optical quality at both zoom levels, which means sharper, cleaner photos without image degradation. The Mate 80 Pro Max and Mate 80 RS Ultimate Design take it even further. They feature a 50-megapixel macro telephoto camera and a 50-megapixel super telephoto camera with 6.2x to 12.4x optical zoom. These phones also include a physical aperture, which gives photographers manual control over depth of field and light intake instead of relying purely on computational photography. The front of all four phones has a selfie camera and a TOF sensing camera for 3D facial recognition, providing fast and secure authentication. The software side runs on the Zmage algorithm for post-capture processing, so photos look stunning straight out of the camera without needing extra editing. Battery capacity is another area where Huawei refuses to compromise. The Mate 80 Pro Max and Mate 80 RS Ultimate design both standardize 6,000 mAh batteries. The base Mate 80 and Mate 80 Pro offer 5,750 mAh. All four phones support 100W superfast wired charging, 80W wireless charging, and 20W wireless reverse charging, so you can power up accessories or help friends who run out of battery. These capacity numbers ensure you can game, stream video, use navigation, and run intensive apps all day without battery anxiety. The design language shifted from curved to flat screens across the entire Mate 80 lineup, reflecting broader industry trends. Flat screens offer better durability, fewer accidental touches, and easier screen protector compatibility. The phones use a flat frame with round corners and a 2.5D treatment at the edges for comfortable handling. The back features a circular camera module that echoes the Mate 40 design, and there's a second circle representing the wireless charging coil. Together, they create a figure 8 shape that's both functional and distinctive. The gold version received extra attention with a unique texture treatment. All four models achieved IP68 and IP69 ratings for water resistance, high temperature resistance, and pressure resistance, ensuring durability in challenging conditions. Now let's address the sanctions elephant in the room. In 2019, the United States blacklisted Huawei and began cutting off chip supply and Google services. In October 2022, the U.S. government imposed sweeping export controls aimed at crippling China's ability to develop and manufacture cutting-edge semiconductor technology. In September 2023, the Netherlands, under intense U.S. pressure, imposed even stricter limitations on lithography machines available to Chinese chipmakers. ASML, the Dutch company that holds a monopoly on EUV lithography machines costing $150 million to $200 million each, was banned from selling to China. China accounts for over 40% of ASML's global sales, but those restrictions were designed to cut Huawei off from the tools needed to make advanced chip. The strategy was simple. Cut off the tools, kill the capability. But Huawei survived by building a domestic supply chain. They developed the Kirin 9020, 9030, and 9030 Pro chipsets using SMIC's 7nm N+2 process. Manufacturing yields sit at only around 20% compared to the typical 70% needed for commercial viability, but they're ramping production anyway. The 8000 nit display technology, the LTPO adaptive refresh, the PWM dimming, the dual periscope camera system, the physical aperture control, and the ZMAGE algorithm are all results of Huawei being forced to innovate independently. The Mate 80 series runs on HarmonyOS 6, a fully independent operating system with integrated AI capabilities, eliminating any dependence on Google. This launch proves that sanctions didn't stop Huawei. They redirected innovation and forced the company to build everything themselves. The result is a phone that competes with and in some areas beats anything from Apple or Samsung. The 20GB RAM configuration in the RS Ultimate design sets a new benchmark for mobile multitasking. The 8000 nit display is unmatched globally. The 42% performance gains represent a massive leap forward despite manufacturing challenges. Whether you can actually buy one depends on where you live. If you're in China, this is a compelling flagship option with competitive pricing and full ecosystem support. If you're outside China, availability is extremely limited, there are no Google services, and warranty support becomes questionable. But the bigger story isn't whether you should buy this phone. The bigger story is that the most aggressive tech sanctions in history failed to stop this launch. Huawei just proved that cutting off access to Western technology doesn't kill innovation. It forces companies to build alternatives, and those alternatives are now competing at the highest level of the smartphone industry. On November 2, 2025, something happened that Silicon Valley hoped you wouldn't notice. Huawei quietly released two desktop computers that completely changed the game in the tech war between the United States and China. The Kirin W515Y and W585Y aren't just another product launch. These machines represent the first time a Chinese company has built desktop computers that don't need a single American component to function. Right now, these systems are being deployed across Chinese government offices and state-owned enterprises, running on processors that Washington said couldn't exist. Here's what makes this absolutely shocking. These desktops are powered by the Kirin 9000X processor, an 8-core, 16-thread chip running at 2.5 GHz that was developed entirely by HiSilicon, which is Huawei's semiconductor division. But here's the crazy part. Huawei hasn't even officially announced this chip exists. There's no press release, no technical specifications on their website, nothing. Yet it's sitting inside commercial desktop computers being sold across China right now. The processor is manufactured by SMIC, China's largest semiconductor foundry, using what industry analysts believe is a 7-nanometer process. Remember, these are the same chips that American export controls were specifically designed to make impossible. Let's talk about why this matters for companies like Intel and Apple. Intel generated $15.53 billion from China in 2024, which represents 29% of their total global revenue. That's nearly $16 billion that's now at risk because Chinese government agencies are being mandated to replace foreign technology with domestic alternative. The policy is called Xinchuang, which translates to Information Technology Application Innovation, and it requires all government and state-owned enterprises to transition to Chinese-made hardware and software by 2027. This isn't some distant threat. It's happening right now. A Bernstein analyst estimated that Intel faces an immediate $1.5 billion revenue hit just from government purchases stopping, and that's just the beginning. But the processor is only part of the story. These Kirin desktops don't run Windows. They don't run macOS. Instead, they ship with two completely Chinese-developed operating systems, Tongxin UOS V20 and Galaxy Kirin KLS V10. Both are built on Linux, but they've been extensively modified with security features designed to meet government requirements. Tongxin UOS is developed by UnionTech, while Galaxy Kirin was originally created for the Chinese military before being adapted for broader commercial use. What this means is that a market of 1.4 billion people is beginning to transition away from Microsoft Windows, which currently runs on 70% of desktop computers worldwide. Now let's look at what Huawei actually achieved with these systems. The previous generation desktop, the L420X, reached a localization rate of 98.4%. Think about what that number actually means. Nearly every single component inside that computer was designed and manufactured within China's borders. The Wi-Fi modules are entirely Huawei designed and manufactured. Most computer makers, including major American brands, source wireless components from Intel, Qualcomm, or Broadcom. Huawei isn't buying from anyone. They're making everything in-house. The same applies to the integrated graphics processors, storage controllers, and countless other specialized chips that most people never think about. The physical design of these computers reveals how seriously Huawei is targeting institutional buyers. The front panel